Welcome, listeners. Welcome back to the Roswell Chronicle. Before we begin this journey into the quiet, desolate heart of the American Southwest, take a moment. Tell us where you are listening from and what time the shadows fall across your screen or into your ears. This is not folklore. This is not a myth spun from campfire tales. This is not a ghost story whispered in the dark. And it is certainly not mere speculation. What you are about to hear is a case documented, then buried. A truth deliberately hidden. A series of events so profoundly unsettling, they reshaped the very landscape of belief in a single, terrifying instant. Imagine the vast, silent expanse of the New Mexico desert, a place where the sky feels impossibly close and secrets seem swallowed by the endless horizon. Then imagine something falling from that sky. Not a meteor, not a plane, something utterly alien, something that defies every known law of physics, every expectation of what exists beyond our world. And then, imagine the swift, overwhelming response, the sudden silence, the immediate absolute control, the calculated deception. A story born of debris and dust, quickly swept away by the most powerful forces on Earth. This is the story of what happened in 1947. This is the story of Roswell. Dim the lights. Settle in. Let's begin. The year was 1947. The place, New Mexico. Not the bustling cities or the well-trodden routes, but the vast, sun-baked expanse of its southeastern plains, a landscape defined by endless horizons and a sky that seemed to stretch into eternity. This was a land of ranchers and quiet towns, of sagebrush and tumbleweeds, where life moved at a pace dictated by the sun's relentless arc and the slow turning of the seasons. The Second World War had ended just 2 years prior, leaving behind a world reeling from conflict, but also brimming with a new, restless energy. America was looking forward to new technologies, new frontiers, and a future that felt both promising and uncertain. In this arid, remote corner of the nation, the nights were long and profoundly dark. Far from the glow of city lights, the stars blazed with an intensity rarely seen elsewhere, a cosmic tapestry that invited contemplation, or perhaps simply a quiet awe. It was a sky that felt ancient, unchanging, a constant presence above lives lived largely in isolation. People here knew the sky. They depended on it for rain, navigated by its stars, and watched its moods with the seasoned eye of those who lived beneath its immense dome. But in the summer of 1947, that familiar, comforting sky was about to become something else entirely. It was July, a month of searing heat during the day, and often clear, cool nights. The air was dry, carrying the scent of dust and distant thunderstorms that sometimes rumbled across the mountains, promising rain that often never materialized. The world below went about its business. Sheep grazed, cattle roamed, and families gathered for supper, their routines unbroken, their thoughts fixed on the small, immediate concerns of daily life. Yet, unseen by most, unheard by all but the vast emptiness, something was stirring in the upper atmosphere. Something was traversing the silent, inky blackness above New Mexico, a presence utterly foreign to the terrestrial world below. The quiet hum of the night, usually broken only by the chirping of crickets or the distant call of a coyote, was on the verge of being shattered. The immense, indifferent sky, which had watched over millennia of human endeavors, was about to become the stage for an event that would defy explanation, ignite a firestorm of speculation, and forever etch the name of a small, obscure town into the annals of unexplained phenomena. The stage was set. The world was about to look up, and what it saw would change everything. It was early morning on the J.B. Foster Ranch, a sprawling expanse of land northwest of Roswell, New Mexico. The date was July the 3rd, 1947, though some accounts place it slightly earlier, around June 14th. The precise timing, like so much else in this story, would later become muddled. William Brazel, a quiet, diligent foreman, was out checking on his sheep after a night of particularly violent thunderstorms. The desert sky, usually a canvas of stars, had been churned into a maelstrom of wind and rain, thunder echoing like distant artillery fire across the plains. Brazel, a man accustomed to the unpredictable temperament of the land, had weathered countless such storms, but this one had felt different. As the morning sun began to bake away the last vestiges of moisture, Brazel rode his horse across a remote pasture, scanning the ground for any signs of trouble. That's when he saw it. Scattered across an area approximately a quarter of a mile long and several hundred feet wide was a field of debris unlike anything he had ever encountered. It wasn't the usual detritus left by a storm. Broken branches, uprooted sagebrush, or even pieces of a weather balloon, which were not uncommon in the area due to military activities at Roswell Army Airfield. This was something else entirely. The fragments were metallic, yet incredibly light. Some pieces were thin, like foil, but possessed an uncanny strength, refusing to bend or crumple even when Brazel tried to test them. Other pieces were rigid, with strange hieroglyphic-like symbols embossed or etched onto their surfaces, symbols he couldn't recognize or decipher. There were also sticks, dark and lightweight, but equally resistant to damage. The material was unlike any metal he knew, displaying an odd resilience and a peculiar lack of weight that defied common sense. He picked up a piece, crumpled it in his hand, and watched in disbelief as it immediately sprang back to its original shape, smooth and unmarred. Brazel spent the better part of the day surveying the strange wreckage, his rancher's practical mind struggling to categorize what his eyes were seeing. It wasn't an airplane, it wasn't a meteor. It certainly wasn't from any earthly vehicle he could conceive of. The sheer quantity of the material spread so widely suggested an object of considerable size had disintegrated here. He gathered a few samples, tying them into a makeshift bundle, his curiosity outweighing his natural reticence. He knew he had stumbled upon something profoundly unusual, something that warranted further investigation. The quiet ranch foreman, unknowingly, had just become the first witness to a discovery that would shake the foundations of human understanding, a secret soon to be sealed away. For several days, William Brazel kept his discovery largely to himself. The vastness of the J.B. Foster Ranch and the remote nature of his life meant that immediate conversation was not always readily available. He continued his ranch duties, but the bizarre debris weighed heavily on his mind. He showed a few pieces to his wife and daughter, their reactions mirroring his own bewilderment. What was this strange, unearthly material? The more he handled it, the more convinced he became that it was not of this world, or at least not of any known human origin. The flexible, memory metal-like foil, the I-beam-like pieces with their inexplicable symbols, it defied every logical explanation. Eventually, Brazel made the decision to travel to Corona, a small town roughly 30 miles north of his ranch, to discuss the matter. It was there, on July the 5th or 6th, that he mentioned his find to residents, including Sheriff George Wilcox. The news of a strange crash and peculiar debris had already begun to circulate quietly through the rural communities. Stories of a flying disc had been reported across the country in the preceding weeks, notably the Kenneth Arnold sighting in Washington state, which had coined the term flying saucer. These national reports had primed the public consciousness for something extraordinary. Sheriff Wilcox, a man of practical mind and deep roots in the community, listened intently to Brazel's account. He examined the samples Brazel had brought, pieces of the strange, resilient foil and the marked sticks. Even Wilcox, accustomed to the oddities of rural life, found himself without a satisfactory explanation. The material was genuinely baffling. Recognizing the unusual nature of the find, and perhaps sensing the potential implications, Wilcox decided to contact the authorities at Roswell Army Airfield, the nearest military installation. The Roswell Arm, airfield was home to the 509th Bomb Group, the only atomic bomb-equipped unit in the world at the time. Its personnel were highly trained, its security paramount. It was not a place to take a casual report of unusual debris lightly. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer for the 509th, was dispatched to investigate. Marcel was an experienced officer, a veteran of several bombing missions during the war, and known for his meticulous approach to intelligence gathering. He arrived at Sheriff Wilcox's office, where he met Brazel and examined the peculiar fragments. Marcel's initial reaction, like Brazel's and Wilcox's, was one of profound intrigue, quickly followed by a dawning realization that this was far beyond a mere weather balloon or conventional aircraft wreckage. The whispers of debris were about to become a roar. Major Jesse Marcel, accompanied by Sheriff Wilcox and William Brazel, arrived at the remote Foster Ranch on July the 7th. The journey was long and arduous, the terrain unforgiving. As they approached the debris field, Marcel's professional skepticism began to unravel. Brazel had not exaggerated. Spread across the vast expanse was an astonishing array of fragments, glittering under the New Mexico sun. Marcel, a seasoned intelligence officer, had seen the wreckage of countless aircraft, both Allied and Axis, but nothing prepared him for this. He dismounted and walked slowly through the field, his gaze sweeping over the scattered pieces. The foil Brazel described was indeed impossibly thin, yet he could not tear or cut it. It felt warm to the touch, almost alive. The sticks were lightweight I-beams, etched with symbols that looked nothing like any known language or engineering mark. They were geometric, almost organic in their flow, yet alien. There were pieces of a metallic-like plastic, a material that seemed to glow faintly when held to the light. The sheer volume of the wreckage suggested an object of considerable size, yet there were no recognizable engines, wings, or fuselage parts. No wires, no rivets, no conventional fasteners. It was as if the entire craft had disintegrated into these peculiar, unidentifiable components. Marcel spent hours meticulously collecting samples, his initial intrigue morphing into a profound sense of awe and apprehension. He knew with an unsettling certainty that this was not a weather balloon, nor any type of aircraft he had ever encountered or even heard whispers about in classified briefings. This was something entirely new, something fundamentally outside the realm of human technology. He gathered as much debris as he could fit into his staff car, filling the trunk and back seat, even stuffing some into his pockets. He wanted to show this to his commanding officer, Colonel William Blanchard, immediately. Upon returning to Roswell Army Airfield, Marcel drove directly to his home, where he woke his wife and son, showing them some of the fragments. Their reactions mirrored his own: disbelief, wonder, and a touch of fear. He then proceeded to the base, the strange cargo clattering in his vehicle. The debris was taken to Colonel Blanchard's office. Blanchard, an equally experienced officer, examined the material with a grim, focused expression. The implications were staggering. Within hours, orders were being issued. The entire debris field on the Foster Ranch would be sealed off. Every single piece of wreckage was to be collected and transported to the base. A press release was drafted, one that would soon ignite a firestorm of speculation and controversy, forever altering the narrative of what happened in the New Mexico desert. The military had arrived, and with them, the first layers of secrecy began to descend. The morning of July 8, 1947, dawned with an extraordinary announcement from the Roswell Army Airfield. Under the direct orders of Colonel William Blanchard, Major Jesse Marcel released a statement to the local press. The headline that blared across the front page of the Roswell Daily Record that afternoon sent shockwaves far beyond the quiet New Mexico town. RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. The accompanying article detailed how the 509th Bomb Group had recovered a flying disc from a ranch near Roswell and that the object had been transported to the base. This initial press release, authorized by the highest levels of the Roswell Command, was unprecedented. It openly acknowledged the recovery of a flying disc, a term that had captured the public imagination in the wake of Kenneth Arnold's sighting. For a brief, dizzying moment, the military itself seemed to confirm the existence of an extraterrestrial craft. The implications were immediate and global. News agencies picked up the story, and the world held its breath. Was this the moment humanity finally confirmed it was not alone? However, the jubilation and astonishment were short-lived. Within hours, a new directive came down from higher echelons of the military, specifically from the 8th Air Force headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas. General Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force, swiftly intervened. He called a press conference, and Major Jesse Marcel was ordered to appear alongside him, visibly uncomfortable. The narrative had been completely rewritten. At the press conference, General Ramey presented what he claimed was the true explanation for the debris. It was merely a weather balloon and its radar reflector. He displayed fragments of what appeared to be conventional weather balloon material and balsa wood, distinctly different from the exotic debris Marcel had collected and initially described. Marcel, standing silently beside his superior, was visibly constrained, offering no contradiction to Ramey's revised account. The official story was now that the Roswell Army airfield had made a mistake, misidentifying a common meteorological device as something more sensational. The sudden reversal left many bewildered. How could an experienced intelligence officer like Major Marcel and his commanding officer, Colonel Blanchard, have so fundamentally misidentified a simple weather balloon? The initial press release had been clear, direct, and authoritative. Now the military was retracting it with an explanation that felt convenient, almost too neat. For the public, the swift change from flying saucer to weather balloon was jarring. For those on the ground in Roswell who had seen the initial debris or heard the whispers from the ranch, the official explanation felt like a deliberate obfuscation. The truth, it seemed, had already begun its descent into shadow. General Ramey's swift retraction, while initially successful in quelling the burgeoning panic and speculation, left an indelible mark of doubt. For those who had been directly involved, or who had witnessed the initial chaos and the actual debris, the official weather balloon explanation simply did not hold up. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who had personally recovered the wreckage, found himself in an agonizing position. Having shown the material to his family and having convinced his commanding officer, Colonel Blanchard, of its extraordinary nature, he was now forced to publicly endorse a narrative he knew to be false. His silence at Ramey's press conference spoke volumes to those who knew him, a reluctant obedience to military protocol overriding personal conviction. Years later, Marcel would break his silence, speaking out forcefully about the true nature of the debris. He consistently maintained that the material he collected was unlike anything earthly. He described the foil that could not be wrinkled or torn, the I-beams with hieroglyphic-like symbols, and the impossibility of cutting the material even with shears. He recounted how the debris displayed unique properties, unlike any conventional weather balloon or radar reflector. His later testimony became a cornerstone for those who believed the government was engaged in a massive cover-up, a first-hand account from a credible military officer. Beyond Marcel, other witnesses began to emerge, their stories quietly contradicting the official line. Rancher W. Brazel, though initially intimidated into silence and even briefly held by military personnel, would later offer tantalizing details that conflicted with the weather balloon story. He spoke of the vast debris field, far more extensive and unusual than any balloon crash site. He mentioned the strange lightweight materials and the symbols. And while he remained cautious, his recollections subtly undermined the official narrative. Then there were the local residents and military personnel who, in the immediate aftermath, had caught glimpses of the recovered material or heard hushed conversations. They spoke of an intense military presence, an unprecedented level of security around the base, and sudden transfers of personnel who had been too close to the incident. Some reported seeing unusual pieces of wreckage being transported, covered by tarpaulins, or recounted stories of being warned to keep silent. These anecdotal accounts, often dismissed as rumor or misremembered details, collectively painted a picture of an event far more significant and mysterious than a mere weather balloon mishap. The official narrative, designed to provide a quick and definitive answer, was already developing cracks, revealing glimpses of a far more complex and unsettling truth beneath. The seeds of a decades-long mystery had been firmly planted. As the initial furor surrounding the Roswell incident subsided, largely due to the military's firm and repeated insistence on the weather balloon explanation, the story faded from mainstream headlines. Yet, beneath the surface of official silence, a different narrative began to slowly coalesce. Decades passed, but the memories of that summer in 1947 never truly faded for those who had been there. As the Cold War intensified and the public grew more cynical of government pronouncements, individuals who had once been silenced by military orders or fear of ridicule began to cautiously step forward. One of the most compelling voices to emerge was Glenn Dennis, a local mortician in Roswell. Dennis recounted how, in the days immediately following the crash, he received urgent calls from the Roswell Army airfield requesting child-sized coffins. He also claimed to have encountered a military nurse, a friend, who was visibly shaken and traumatized. She reportedly confided in him about assisting military doctors with what she described as non-human bodies recovered from the crash site. She spoke of small, slender beings with large heads and eyes, unlike anything she had ever seen. Before she could provide more details, she was abruptly transferred, and Dennis never saw her again, fueling speculation that she had been silenced. Another significant figure was Frankie Rowe, a young girl at the time, who had been present at Brazel's ranch shortly after the discovery. She described finding strange, lightweight metal pieces that, when crumpled, immediately returned to their original shape. She also mentioned seeing a box or crate with strange symbols, and being warned by military personnel not to talk about what she had seen. Her vivid, consistent recollections, told years later as an adult, added another layer of testimony that directly contradicted the weather balloon narrative. Skeptics often dismiss these later accounts as confabulations, the result of faulty memory or the desire for attention. However, the sheer number of independent witnesses, many of whom had no prior connection to each other, and whose descriptions often contained remarkably consistent details, began to chip away at the official explanation. Former military personnel, ranchers, local law enforcement and civilians all offered fragments of a story that pointed towards something truly extraordinary. Their testimonies, collected over years by persistent investigators, created a mosaic of evidence that suggested the Roswell incident was far more complex and far more concealed than the government had ever admitted. The voices from the past were growing louder, demanding to be heard and challenging the carefully constructed wall of silence that had stood for so long. The emergence of witnesses, while crucial to the unfolding counter-narrative, also highlighted a more insidious aspect of the Roswell incident: the systematic, almost surgical, suppression of information. This was no mere error in communication or a simple attempt to calm public fears. An unseen hand had moved swiftly and decisively, orchestrating a cover-up so effective that it locked away the truth for decades. The speed and efficiency with which the military clamped down on the story suggested a pre-existing protocol, a contingency plan for dealing with events of extraordinary magnitude. From the moment the initial press release went out, announcing the capture of a flying disc, the machinery of control was activated. General Ramey's immediate intervention, the hurried press conference with the weather balloon debris, was just the visible tip of an iceberg. Behind the scenes, a far more extensive operation was underway. Witnesses were not merely asked to recant. They were intimidated, their livelihoods threatened, their families put under unspoken duress. Military personnel involved in the recovery were swiftly transferred, scattered to different bases, their experiences compartmentalized, and their silence enforced by the strictest military orders. The debris itself, the physical evidence that Major Marcel had so carefully collected, vanished into the labyrinthine channels of military intelligence. It was not simply discarded. It was secured, transported, and analyzed in secret facilities, far from public scrutiny. The crash site itself was meticulously scoured, every last fragment removed, ensuring that no independent investigation could ever verify the initial claims. This level of thoroughness spoke volumes about the perceived importance of what had been found. It wasn't just about preventing panic. It was about protecting a secret of immense national security. Implications. Those who dared to speak out, even years later, often found themselves facing subtle forms of retaliation or ridicule. Their reputations were questioned, their sanity doubted, their stories dismissed as fabrications or delusions. This psychological warfare proved almost as effective as direct threats, isolating potential whistleblowers and discouraging others from coming forward. The unseen hand was not a single individual but a vast, coordinated effort, a network of power and influence dedicated to maintaining the official narrative, regardless of the truth. It painted a chilling picture of an establishment willing to go to extreme lengths to control information, shaping public perception and burying a secret that, even today, continues to defy easy explanation. The true nature of this controlling force and its ultimate motives remained one of Roswell's most unsettling mysteries. The tendrils of the unseen hand reached far beyond the dusty plains of New Mexico, extending into the rarefied air of international diplomacy and the hushed corridors of power. While the military focused on local suppression and evidence removal, a different kind of secrecy was being orchestrated at a much higher echelon. It was here, among those tasked with navigating global politics, that the true weight of the Roswell discovery was perhaps most acutely felt. The implications of an extraterrestrial presence were not merely domestic, they were planetary. Years after the incident, a peculiar fragment of this high-level silence began to surface through the memoirs and posthumous papers of a former United States ambassador, one who had served in key diplomatic posts during the late 1940s. While never explicitly naming Roswell, his cryptic allusions spoke of an unprecedented global security imperative that emerged in the summer of 1947, demanding absolute secrecy and coordinated international silence. He wrote of urgent, clandestine meetings with foreign counterparts, not about the nascent Cold War, but about matters of cosmic significance that threatened to unravel societal order and shift geopolitical power if revealed. This unnamed ambassador hinted at directives issued from the highest offices, not just to control information within national borders, but to ensure that no other major world power could exploit or even acknowledge the truth of what had occurred. His notes spoke of a delicate dance, convincing allies to maintain a united front of denial and subtly warning adversaries against publicizing any independent intelligence they might have gathered. The fear was not just of panic, but of a global arms race for alien technology, or worse, a worldwide existential crisis that governments felt ill-equipped to manage. The ambassador's secret, as it became, known among a small circle of researchers, suggested that the Roswell cover-up was not an isolated act of military deception, but the foundational stone of a much grander, multinational strategy of information control. It implied that the United States had not merely hidden a crashed craft, but had taken on the immense burden of managing humanity's first undeniable encounter with the unknown, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy. This revelation added a chilling dimension to the Roswell narrative, transforming it from a simple local mystery into a global conspiracy, meticulously woven into the fabric of international relations, its threads pulled by unseen hands in distant capitals. The silence, it seemed, was a shared burden, a secret so profound it transcended national borders. For those who sought to pierce the veil of secrecy surrounding Roswell, the official archives presented a frustrating and often maddening landscape. While the military had been effective in controlling direct witnesses and physical evidence, the true measure of their success lay in the meticulous crafting of official narratives and the systematic sanitization of records. Researchers delving into government documents from the era quickly discovered not a treasure trove of hidden truths, but a carefully constructed void, punctuated by tantalizing, yet ultimately inconclusive, fragments. The immediate aftermath of the incident saw a flurry of activity in various federal agencies, particularly those related to intelligence and defense. Yet, when one attempted to trace the paper trail of the flying disc or the weather balloon, the trail quickly dissolved. Memos that should have existed were conspicuously absent. Reports that should have followed standard protocol either vanished or were replaced by bland, innocuous summaries that bore no resemblance to the initial excitement. It was as if a meticulous editor had gone through every relevant file, excising anything that deviated from the official story. One common tactic observed by persistent investigators was the strategic placement of seemingly irrelevant documents. Folders marked Roswell or UFO often contained reams of weather data, conventional aircraft reports, or even unrelated intelligence briefings, effectively burying any genuine anomalies within a mountain of mundane information. This created plausible deniability, allowing officials to claim that all relevant records were indeed accessible, while ensuring that the crucial pieces remained hidden in plain sight, or more often, entirely removed. Then there were the redactions. When truly sensitive documents surfaced, often through Freedom of Information TEAT requests decades later, they arrived heavily censored, entire paragraphs or even pages blacked out. The very act of redaction, however, often spoke volumes. Why redact a weather balloon report? Why obscure the names of junior officers involved in a routine recovery? The extent of the censorship, far from reassuring, only amplified suspicions, suggesting that the information being protected was far more significant than any officially acknowledged secret. The archives, therefore, became a testament not to transparency, but to the shadow government's unparalleled ability to control information. They were a landscape of absence, a library of deliberate omissions. The true story of Roswell was not to be found in what the government had kept, but in what it had so carefully removed. It was a chilling testament to the power of an unseen hand to rewrite history, leaving behind only the ghost of a truth that stubbornly refused to be fully erased, a persistent whisper in the empty spaces between the lines. The Roswell incident, far from being a haphazard suppression, revealed a chillingly sophisticated and multi-layered strategy of information control, a veritable blueprint for how to bury an inconvenient truth. It was a masterclass in the anatomy of a cover-up, executed with a precision that suggested prior contingency planning for just such an extraordinary event. The initial phase was one of immediate, overwhelming physical containment and control. Military personnel operating with almost surgical efficiency swept the crash sites, ensuring every fragment, every scrap of debris, and every biological specimen was removed. This was not merely collection, it was eradication, designed to leave no trace. Simultaneously, a concerted effort was launched to neutralize witnesses. This involved a spectrum of tactics, from direct intimidation and veiled threats to the more subtle application of psychological pressure. Individuals were coerced into signing non-disclosure agreements, their livelihoods threatened, their reputations implicitly on the line. Some were subjected to intense debriefings, designed not to gather information, but to instill fear and ensure silence. The message was clear: speak and face severe consequences. The sudden transfer of key personnel, like Major Jesse Marcel, further fragmented the narrative, scattering potential sources of information across the country. The public face of the cover-up was the rapid deployment of a carefully crafted disinformation campaign. The initial tantalizing news of a flying disc was swiftly and emphatically retracted, replaced by the mundane, almost insulting explanation of a weather balloon. This swift pivot was crucial, overwhelming the nascent public curiosity with an official authoritative denial before any independent investigation could gain traction. The media, largely compliant in the era of post-war patriotism, played its part, amplifying the official narrative and effectively shutting down further inquiry. Beyond the immediate crisis management, the cover-up extended into the bureaucratic labyrinth. Official records were meticulously altered or simply vanished. Documents that mentioned the disc were purged, replaced by innocuous reports, or buried within mountains of unrelated paperwork. This process, often referred to as archival sanitization, ensured that future generations, attempting to piece together the truth through official channels, would find only dead ends and carefully constructed voids. The goal was not merely to hide an event, but to erase its very existence from the public record. Finally, the long-term strategy relied on the erosion of memory and the cultivation of doubt. Over decades, the story was relegated to the realm of folklore, dismissed by officialdom and ridiculed in mainstream discourse. Witnesses who continued to speak out were labeled as fantasists or conspiracy theorists, their credibility systematically undermined. This persistent low-level campaign of discrediting served to inoculate the public against the truth, ensuring that even if fragments of evidence occasionally surfaced, they would be met with skepticism and derision. The anatomy of the Roswell cover-up was a testament to the power of a coordinated, relentless effort to control perception, a chilling demonstration of how easily reality can be bent, twisted, and ultimately hidden in plain sight. While the physical evidence was swept clean and the official records meticulously sanitized, the one element the cover-up could never fully control was the human memory. The people involved, the rancher who found the debris, the military intelligence officer who first inspected it, the local civilians who witnessed the unusual activity, carried the truth within them. For many, the experience was profoundly traumatic, leaving an indelible mark that time and official denials could not erase. Their stories, often fragmented and told decades later, became the most persistent challenge to the government's carefully constructed narrative. Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer from the 509th Bomb Group, remained a pivotal figure. Despite his later public recantation of the weather balloon story, forced upon him by his superiors, his initial, genuine astonishment at the material he recovered never faded. He described it as unlike anything he had ever seen, light yet incredibly strong, unburnable and unbendable. His subsequent interviews, often fraught with a sense of betrayal and frustration, provided a powerful counter-narrative to the official line. Marcel's integrity, combined with his first-hand experience, lent immense weight to the idea that something truly extraordinary had occurred. Then there were the lesser-known witnesses, the ranch hands, the deputies, the curious onlookers who saw military convoys moving at unusual hours or caught glimpses of strange materials being loaded onto trucks. Their accounts, though often dismissed individually, formed a mosaic of consistent details: the unusual nature of the debris, the intense secrecy, the unprecedented military presence. Many of these individuals were ordinary citizens, with no agenda other than to recount what they had seen. Their quiet persistence, often in the face of ridicule, became a testament to the power of personal experience against institutional denial. The emotional toll on these witnesses was significant. Some lived with fear for decades, hesitant to speak out, worried about repercussions for themselves or their families. Others carried the burden of knowing a profound truth that the world refused to acknowledge. This internal conflict, the struggle between personal conviction and external pressure, often manifested in later years as a desperate need to finally share their story before it was too late. Their advanced age and the approaching end of their lives often spurred them to break their long-held silence, adding a poignant urgency to their testimonies. The human element, therefore, became both the most vulnerable and the most resilient aspect of the Roswell mystery. While bodies could be silenced and documents could be destroyed, the memories and experiences of those who were there continued to echo through the decades. These personal narratives, passed down through families, whispered in quiet conversations, and eventually shared publicly, ensured that the truth, however inconvenient or unsettling, would never entirely disappear. They were the living archives, the breathing testament to a secret that refused to stay buried. Decades after the initial incident, the carefully constructed edifice of the Roswell cover-up began to show significant cracks. The passage of time, the retirement and deaths of key military personnel, and the relentless efforts of independent researchers started to pry open the sealed compartments of history. The human element, once suppressed, now emerged as a formidable force, with former military officers and civilians, free from oaths of secrecy or the fear of reprisal, stepping forward to share their long-held truths. One of the most impactful revelations came from Glenn Dennis, a mortician in Roswell in 1947. Dennis recounted being contacted by the base hospital to provide child-sized coffins and being warned not to speak about the incident. More chillingly, he described encountering a nurse who confided in him about assisting with autopsies of non-human beings, describing their small stature, large heads, and slit-like nostrils. She spoke of the horror and strangeness of the situation, and then, mysteriously, vanished days later, transferred or silenced. Dennis's testimony, given credibility by his profession and direct involvement, was a stark contradiction to the weather balloon narrative. Further cracks appeared with the testimony of Walter Haut, the public information officer who had issued the initial groundbreaking press release about the flying disc. For decades, Haut remained silent, upholding the official story. However, in a sworn affidavit sealed until his death in 2005, Haut revealed that he had been shown the crash debris, not at the ranch, but in a hangar at Roswell Army Airfield. He described seeing a craft unlike anything earthly, and confirmed that he had also seen several small bodies. Haut's deathbed confession, from the very man who had been the face of the initial, truthful announcement, then the subsequent retraction, was a devastating blow to the official narrative. The sheer volume of consistent, independent testimonies, often from individuals who had no prior contact with each other, began to overwhelm the government's denials. Witnesses described similar metallic materials, unearthly in their properties, and consistently spoke of small, non-human beings. These were not isolated accounts, but a chorus of voices, slowly building a picture that was far more complex and extraordinary than any weather balloon. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and hidden, were now being reassembled by a determined public. The unraveling was not a sudden burst of light, but a gradual, persistent erosion of secrecy. Each new testimony, each declassified document, however heavily redacted, chipped away at the official falsehoods. The public's perception began to shift, moving from outright dismissal to a growing acceptance that something genuinely inexplicable had occurred in the New Mexico desert. The truth, stubbornly resisting burial, was finally beginning to surface, revealing the profound implications of what had truly happened near Roswell. As the individual threads of testimony and suppressed information began to weave together, the sheer weight of the accumulated evidence became undeniable to a growing number of people. It was no longer a matter of isolated anecdotes or wild speculation. A compelling case for an extraterrestrial craft and its occupants lay before the public, meticulously pieced together by researchers and former officials. The challenge shifted from proving that something extraordinary happened to understanding why it was so vehemently denied. The physical descriptions of the debris remained remarkably consistent across multiple independent accounts. Witnesses, from Jesse Marcel to rancher W. Brazel, spoke of materials that defied conventional understanding, lightweight yet incredibly strong, unbendable, unburnable, and possessing strange symbols or hieroglyphs. These descriptions were not vague. They detailed specific properties and characteristics that were utterly alien to 1947 technology. The consistency across varied sources, often from individuals who had no contact with one another, lent powerful credence to their claims. Beyond the debris, the descriptions of the alleged occupants were equally consistent and chilling. Multiple sources, including the mortician Glenn Dennis and the sworn affidavit of Walter Haut, spoke of small humanoid figures with large heads, slender bodies, and unique facial features. These accounts were not just from casual observers, but from individuals who claimed direct, close-up interaction or had heard first-hand details from medical personnel. The uniformity of these descriptions, again, argued against mere fabrication or mass hysteria. Furthermore, the government's own actions and subsequent explanations inadvertently bolstered the alternative narrative. The initial press release, quickly followed by a dramatic retraction, and the presentatit on of a weather balloon, was a clumsy and transparent attempt at damage control. The rapid deployment of military personnel, the intense secrecy, the alleged threats and intimidation against witnesses. These were not typical responses to a downed meteorological device. Such extreme measures suggested a far more significant and sensitive event was being concealed. The official investigations launched decades later, such as the Air Force's 1994 and 1997 reports, while attempting to definitively close the case, often raised more questions than they answered. Their conclusions, suggesting the debris was from a Project Mogul balloon and the alleged bodies were crash test dummies or misidentified human remains, were met with widespread skepticism. Critics pointed to logical inconsistencies, selective use of evidence, and a general lack of transparency that only deepened public mistrust. The official explanations often felt forced, designed to fit a predetermined conclusion rather than genuinely explore the evidence. Ultimately, the weight of the evidence rests not on any single piece, but on the cumulative force of hundreds of testimonies, declassified documents, and the inherent contradictions within the official narrative. It paints a picture of an incident of profound significance, carefully orchestrated to remain hidden. The challenge for the public now was to reconcile this growing body of evidence with the continued institutional denial. The Roswell incident, though officially explained away as a weather balloon, continued to echo through the corridors of power and the collective consciousness of the world. It became more than just a historical event. It transformed into a cultural touchstone, a symbol of government secrecy and the enduring human fascination with the unknown. The initial cover-up, however imperfect, had succeeded in burying the official truth, yet it inadvertently gave birth to a legend that refused to die, permeating popular culture and fueling a global debate about extraterrestrial life and government transparency. In the decades following 1947, Roswell became synonymous with UFOs, alien encounters, and shadowy government operations. Movies, television shows, books, and documentaries repeatedly revisited the mystery, each time adding new layers to the narrative, whether factual or fictionalized. This constant cultural reinforcement ensured that Roswell never faded into obscurity. Instead, it became a benchmark against which all other alleged UFO incidents were measured, solidifying its place as America's most famous and perhaps most frustrating unsolved mystery. Beyond the realm of entertainment, the echoes of Roswell profoundly impacted the public's perception of authority. The perceived deception surrounding the incident fostered a deep-seated distrust in official narratives, particularly concerning sensitive topics. It ignited a generation of citizen investigators and fueled a skeptical approach to government pronouncements. For many, Roswell became the ultimate example of how easily the truth could be manipulated or withheld, leading to a broader questioning of what else might be hidden. The scientific community, largely dismissive of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, found itself in a difficult position. While official scientific bodies maintained a stance of skepticism, the sheer volume of witness testimony and the persistent nature of the claims forced a degree of engagement. The incident indirectly spurred discussions about the possibility of life beyond Earth, even if it didn't lead to immediate scientific consensus on the Roswell case itself. It pushed the boundaries of conventional thought, forcing a reluctant acknowledgement that some phenomena remained unexplained. Even today, the echoes persist. The town of Roswell, New Mexico, has embraced its controversial legacy, becoming a global pilgrimage site for UFO enthusiasts. Its museums, festivals, and alien-themed businesses are a testament to the enduring power of the story. The incident continues to be a battleground between those who believe in an extraterrestrial visitation and those who adhere to the official explanations or offer alternative prosaic theories. The legacy of Roswell is not merely about whether an alien craft crashed in the desert. It is about the profound impact of secrecy, the resilience of alternative narratives, and humanity's unyielding desire to uncover hidden truths. The incident, even in its ambiguity, forever altered the landscape of public discourse on government transparency, the nature of reality, and our place in the cosmos. The silence imposed in 1947 has been replaced by a chorus of questions that continue to resonate across the world. After decades of denial, countless investigations, and a relentless pursuit of truth, the question still looms. What truly fell from the New Mexico sky in the summer of 1947? The official narrative, meticulously crafted and repeatedly reinforced, points to a downed weather balloon from Project Mogul. Yet the mountain of conflicting evidence, the consistent testimony of dozens of witnesses, and the sheer scale of the subsequent cover-up paint a profoundly different picture. When all the pieces are laid bare, the conclusion, however extraordinary, becomes difficult to ignore. What fell from the sky was not a conventional balloon, nor was it a terrestrial aircraft. The debris, described by those who handled it as unlike anything known to man, a material both lightweight and incredibly strong, unbendable yet flexible, bearing strange symbols, speaks of technology far beyond the capabilities of 1940s human engineering. The rapid military response, the immediate collection and classification of every fragment, and the draconian measures taken to silence witnesses all indicate something of immense strategic and scientific value, something utterly unprecedented. And within that wreckage, or nearby, were the occupants. The consistent descriptions of small, slender beings with disproportionately large heads and dark, almond-shaped eyes, relayed by individuals from varied backgrounds and professions, cannot be dismissed as collective hallucination. From the rancher who first discovered the debris to military personnel and alleged medical staff, the accounts converge on the existence of non-human entities. These were not crash test dummies, nor were they misidentified human remains. They were beings from somewhere else who had traveled an unimaginable distance only to meet a tragic end in the desolate American desert. The government's immediate and forceful efforts to suppress this truth were not born of simple embarrassment or a desire to avoid panic. They were driven by the profound implications of such a discovery. The existence of intelligent extraterrestrial life, the acquisition of advanced technology, and the overwhelming shift in humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. Such revelations, in the volatile geopolitical climate of the Cold War, were deemed too destabilizing, too monumental to be revealed to an unprepared world. So the truth was buried, not under desert sand, but under layers of misinformation, fear, and official decree. The Roswell incident was not merely a downed weather balloon. It was a profound encounter, a collision of worlds that forever altered the trajectory of human history, albeit in secret. What fell from the sky was a testament to the fact that we are not alone, a truth carefully hidden, yet echoing still, a silent alarm bell for humanity's future. We have journeyed through the desolate landscapes of New Mexico, delved into the shadowed corners of classified files, and listened to the persistent whispers of those who dared to speak. What began as a simple discovery on a ranch quickly escalated into a global enigma, a symbol of the profound mysteries that lie just beyond our understanding. This is not merely a tale spun for entertainment, nor a legend to be casually dismissed. The Roswell incident stands as a stark reminder of the fragile nature of truth and the immense power wielded by those who choose what we are allowed to know. The deliberate suppression of information, the careful crafting of official narratives, and the silencing of witnesses all leave a lingering consequence, shaping our collective consciousness and our trust in the very institutions meant to protect us. The questions it raised about our place in the cosmos and the extent of governmental transparency refuse to be fully answered, refusing to be silenced. The mystery of what fell from the sky in 1947 does not fully rest. The vast, star-strewn sky above Roswell continues its silent vigil, indifferent to human proclamations. And perhaps the forces that brought something to Earth that fateful night are still out there, still watching, still waiting for another moment to intersect with our world, another secret to unfold. We invite you, our listeners, to share your thoughts on this profound journey. Tell us where you are listening from and what time it is for you as these echoes reach you across time and space. For the Lostvale Chronicle, the silence that follows the truth can sometimes be the most unsettling sound of all. Until next time, keep your eyes on the stars and your mind open to the unseen.